In the solemn stillness of a courtroom, something incredible was about to unfold. A young boy, barely 8 years old, stood before the judge with a mixture of confidence and fear. His words were simple but powerful. "I'm my mom's lawyer." The room went silent as whispers filled the air. What could a little boy possibly do in a place reserved for professionals? But as he spoke, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't just a plea for justice. It was a declaration. This wasn't going to be just another day in court. This was going to be a fight, and the boy was leading it. His statement sent shockwaves, challenging the system that often overlooked people like his mother. What happened next would change everything. The courtroom was packed with onlookers, lawyers, and officials who had seen it all. They knew the stories, the struggles, the broken promises. But today, there was an undercurrent of something else. A sense of anticipation lingered in the air as Jamal, a young black boy, sat nervously beside his mother, his eyes darting from the faces in the room to the towering judge. Jamal's mother, a single parent, had been fighting for a better life for her son for years. Every day was a battle, against the system, against unfair policies, and against the constant prejudice they faced. It wasn't just about a courtroom win. This was about securing her son's future. She had spent her whole life trying to keep him safe from the harshness of the world outside. But no matter how hard she tried, the weight of the world seemed to keep pushing her down. Jamal had always seen his mother struggle, but he also saw her strength. He saw her wake up early, work 2 jobs, and still come home with a smile. Despite the exhaustion, despite the challenges, she never let him see her break. But on this day, as she stood in front of the judge, Jamal saw her falter. Her voice wavered as she spoke, explaining how important this case was for their family. She was fighting for her right to remain in the neighborhood where Jamal had grown up, fighting against a system that saw her as nothing more than a statistic. The case seemed straightforward to the judge, but Jamal knew this wasn't just about facts or numbers. This was about people, about families, about lives that were at risk. It was then that he realized his mom needed him, not just as her son, but as her ally. And Jamal, in his innocence and courage, stood up. His small body trembled with determination as he walked to the front. "Your Honor," Jamal's voice broke through the air, barely audible at first. The judge looked up, his stern gaze meeting the boy's wide eyes. "What is it, son?" the judge asked, a trace of condescension in his voice. The room fell silent, eyes shifting from the boy to the judge. No one expected him to speak, let alone challenge the authority of the courtroom. But Jamal didn't care. "I'm her lawyer," he repeated, his voice a little stronger now. "My mom's telling the truth. She needs this." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The judge, who had spent his career making decisions that affected countless lives, was taken aback. For a moment, he seemed unsure of how to proceed. The lawyers exchanged glances, their confidence shaken. What do you do when a child, someone so small, stands before you with so much conviction? Jamal wasn't just standing up for his mother. He was standing up for every child who had ever been ignored, every voice that had ever been silenced. He was giving his mother a voice in a world that often didn't listen. The weight of his words began to settle in, and the room seemed to close in around them. With a steadying breath, Jamal continued, pointing to his mother. "She works hard. She loves me. She deserves this." His words weren't perfect, but they were pure, and they cut through the noise in the room like nothing else. It wasn't just his words. It was the truth in them. As the judge looked at Jamal, something changed in his eyes. He had heard hundreds of cases, each more complex and technical than the last. He was used to legal jargon, to well-prepared arguments. But this was different. A child, standing in front of him, had just laid bare a truth that no one could ignore. The tension in the room was palpable. Even the lawyers had stopped talking, their arguments forgotten in the face of this unexpected moment. Jamal's mother, tears threatening to spill, watched her son with a mixture of pride and awe. She knew that he was fighting for more than just their case. He was fighting for their dignity, for a future where they weren't defined by the color of their skin or the hardships they faced. The judge's hand moved toward his gavel, but before he struck it down, he paused, his gaze still locked on Jamal. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then finally, he leaned forward and said, "I've never heard a statement like that in my courtroom. The case is reopened." The room held its breath. The decision was made. The boy's simple, unshakable belief in his mother had shaken the very foundation of the case. Jamal's words had sparked a change, a ripple that would be felt long after they left the courthouse. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jamal's mother, now granted a second chance, stood tall with a renewed sense of hope. The case had been revisited, and the outcome had been in her favor. But for Jamal, this wasn't just about winning in court. It was about the impact of his actions, the realization that his voice, no matter how small, could change everything. His mother's victory was a personal triumph, but it was also a victory for every person who had ever been overlooked, for every child who had ever been told their voice didn't matter. Jamal's courage had opened a door, not just for him and his mother, but for countless others who faced the same struggle. Jamal's story quickly spread, making headlines across the country. People marveled at his bravery, his ability to speak truth to power when no one else would. He became a symbol of hope, of resistance, and of the undeniable power of speaking out against injustice. But the story didn't end there. Jamal's simple question echoed through the hearts of those who heard it. How many voices like mine have gone unheard? How many children, how many families have been silenced by a system that refuses to see them? Jamal's story didn't just change the outcome of a legal case. It challenged all of us to listen more carefully, to act with empathy, and to speak out when we see injustice. It made us ask ourselves, how long will we allow a system to ignore the most vulnerable among us? How long will we remain silent in the face of inequality? The fight for justice, for equality, is far from over. But with every voice that rises, with every child that stands tall like Jamal, change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. And now the question remains, how will you use your voice?